The storm hit Wyoming like God had a personal grudge against it. Eliza Crow didn't believe in divine intervention anymore. Not after burying her father in frozen ground with her bare hands. Not after watching everything he built get ripped away by men in clean boots and crooked smiles. But if there was a God, he had a sixth sense of timing, because the rain started the exact moment Marcus Hale's men found her stealing bread from the back of a supply wagon. She ran. Of course she ran. What else was a 23-year-old woman supposed to do when three armed men on horseback came thundering after her through the mud-slicked streets of a town that had already decided she didn't matter? Her feet slipped. Her dress, already torn, already filthy from 2 weeks of sleeping in abandoned barns, caught on a fence post and ripped further. She heard the men laughing behind her, their voices cutting through the rain like knives. "You're just making it worse for yourself, girl." She didn't have the breath to answer. Her lungs burned. Her ribs, still bruised from the last beating, screamed with every step. The bread she'd stolen was already lost somewhere in the mud behind her, probably trampled by their horses. It didn't matter. Nothing she did seemed to matter anymore. The edge of town blurred past. Buildings gave way to open land, and that's when she knew she'd made a mistake. No witnesses out here. No one to hear anything. Just rain and darkness and men who'd been given permission to do whatever they wanted. Her boot caught in a rut. She went down hard, face first into mud that tasted like iron and rot. Before she could push herself up, a hand grabbed her hair and yanked her head back. "Thought you could outrun horses?" The voice belonged to Pike, Hale's foreman, a man with a face like a clenched fist and a reputation for cruelty that made even other cruel men uncomfortable. "You're dumber than you look." He threw her down. She hit the ground and stayed there, because getting up would just mean getting knocked down again. She'd learned that lesson already. Another man dismounted. She didn't know his name, didn't care. They all wore the same brand of meanness anyway. Mr. Hale said to teach her a lesson about taking what ain't hers. The unnamed man cracked his knuckles. "Funny, considering." Pike laughed at that. "Real funny. Girl's daddy owned half this territory once, and now she's stealing day-old bread. How the mighty fall, huh?" Eliza tried to push herself up. A boot planted itself between her shoulder blades and pressed her back down. "Stay down," Pike said. "We ain't done talking." "My father," she started. The boot pressed harder, forcing air from her lungs. "Your father's dead. His land belongs to Mr. Hale now, legal and proper. You want to dispute that? You take it up with the territorial court." Pike's voice dropped lower. "Oh, wait. You tried that already, didn't you? How'd that work out?" It had worked out exactly how it was supposed to work when the judge was on Hale's payroll and the sheriff was his cousin. She'd stood in that courtroom with her father's original deed, hand-drawn map, and witness statements from 3 neighbors. The judge had looked at it all for maybe 30 seconds before declaring the documents insufficient and the witnesses unreliable. She'd walked out of that courthouse with nothing but the clothes on her back and a burning certainty that the law was just another tool rich men used to take what they wanted. The boot lifted. She gasped, sucking in air and rain and mud. "Get her up," Pike said. Hands grabbed her arms, hauled her to her feet. Her legs barely held her. The third man, still mounted, leaned forward in his saddle, studying her like she was livestock. "She don't look like much now," he said. "Hard to believe she caused so much trouble." "Trouble?" Eliza's voice came out raw. "I asked for what's mine." Pike backhanded her. Her head snapped to the side, but blood filled her mouth. "What's yours?" Pike stepped closer. "Listen to me, girl. You got nothing. You are nothing. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life gets." She spat blood into the mud. "Go to hell." This time when he hit her, she went down and stayed down. The world tilted. Rain hammered her face. Somewhere far away, she heard one of the men say something about leaving her, about the cold doing their work for them. Then hoofbeats, fading, moving away. She lay in the mud and waited for the cold to finish what they'd started. Her father's face swam up through the darkness behind her eyelids. Not as he'd looked in the end, wasted by fever and grief, but as he'd been when she was small, strong, laughing, lifting her onto his shoulders so she could see over the crowd at the summer fair. "I'm sorry, Papa," she whispered. "I tried." The rain answered, only the rain, then a different sound. Footsteps. Slower than the horses. Deliberate. She managed to open one eye. A shape moved through the storm. A man on foot, leading a horse. Tall, broad-shouldered. He stopped a few feet away, and she waited for whatever came next. Another beating, a bullet, didn't matter anymore. "You planning to die there?" The voice was rough, Western, but not unkind. She didn't answer, couldn't. "Those Hale's men who just rode off?" Something in his tone made her look up properly. The man wore a long coat, dark with rain. His hat dripped water. In the dim light, she couldn't make out his face clearly, but she could see the rifle in his hand, held loose and ready. "If you're with them," she started. "Do I look like I'm with them?" He glanced down the road where Pike and his men had disappeared. "I know Pike. Known him 10 years. He's a bastard, but he ain't stupid enough to leave someone alive if Hale wanted them dead." The man looked back at her. "Which means either you ain't important enough to kill, or you got something he wants first." Eliza tried to sit up, failed. The man muttered something under his breath and stepped closer. "I'm going to help you up," he said. "You try to run, you'll fall on your face again. You try to fight me, I'll let you go back to dying in the mud. Understood?" She nodded. His hands were careful, impersonal. He got her on her feet, and when her legs buckled, he caught her weight like it was nothing. "Name's Caleb Rourke," he said. "I got a cabin about 2 miles west. You can make it that far, or you can stay here and freeze. Your choice." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you help me?" "Because I saw what Pike did." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And because I knew your father." That cut through the fog of pain and exhaustion. "You knew. Thomas Crow, good man, better horseman." Caleb looked at her more closely. "You got his eyes. I heard he died last winter. Heard other things, too." He paused. "You're the daughter who's been causing trouble for Hale." "Trouble?" She almost laughed. "Is that what they call it when you ask for your own property back?" "They call it whatever keeps the story simple." Caleb glanced up at the storm. "We can talk politics later. Right now you need dry clothes and something hot to drink, or you'll be dead before morning." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need help, didn't need anyone, but her body had other ideas. When he guided her toward his horse, she let him. When he lifted her into the saddle like she weighed nothing, she didn't fight it. The ride to his cabin blurred together, rain, darkness, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her, Caleb's hand on her arm keeping her from falling. She drifted in and out, aware of pain but distant from it, like it was happening to someone else. The cabin appeared suddenly, a dark shape against darker trees. Caleb helped her down, half carried her to the door. Inside, he lit a lamp, and warm light pushed back the shadows. It was small. One room, basically, with a fireplace, a bed, a table, shelves of supplies. Clean, though. Organized. The home of a man who lived alone but hadn't given up on living. "Sit." Caleb pointed to a chair near the cold fireplace. She sat, watched as he built a fire with quick, practiced movements. Within minutes, flames crackled and heat began to spread. He disappeared into a corner, came back with a blanket and a towel. "Get out of those wet clothes," he said, turning his back. "There's a shirt on the bed that'll fit you better than that dress." "I'll heat some water for coffee." Eliza's hand shook as she peeled off her ruined dress. Everything hurt. The bruises on her ribs had bruises of their own. Her face felt swollen where Pike had hit her. But she managed to dry off, pull on Caleb's shirt. It hung to her knees, worn soft flannel that smelled like wood smoke and horse, and wrapped the blanket around herself. "Done," she said. Caleb turned back. If he had any thoughts about her appearance, he kept them to himself. He just nodded and went back to the fire, where a pot of water was already starting to steam. "How bad are you hurt?" "I'll live." "That's not what I asked." She touched her ribs gingerly. "Nothing broken, I think. I've had worse." His jaw tightened again, but he didn't comment. Just made coffee, poured 2 cups, handed her one. The first sip burned her split lip. The second one warmed her from the inside out. She wrapped both hands around the cup and let the heat seep into her fingers. "You said you knew my father," she said finally. "Worked with him 5-6 years ago. He needed someone to break a string of wild horses he'd bought off a Shoshone trader. I spent a summer on his land." Caleb sat in the other chair, cradling his own coffee. "He talked about you, said you could outride most men and outstubborn all of them." Despite everything, Eliza felt her throat tighten. "He taught me." "I believe it." Caleb studied her over the rim of his cup. "What happened after he died?" She told him. Not everything. There were parts she couldn't talk about yet, maybe ever, but enough. Her father's illness, the debts he'd racked up trying to keep the ranch running, the way Marcus Hale had shown up at the funeral with papers claiming Thomas Crow had signed over the land to settle what he owed. Forgeries? Eliza said flatly. My father would never— I know, Caleb said. Thomas loved that land. It was his life's work. The judge didn't care. Hale had documents, I had my word. Guess which one carried more weight? So you've been doing what? Trying to prove the documents were fake? Trying to survive, mostly. She stared into her coffee. I had some money saved. It ran out. I've been staying in barns, taking work where I can find it. Which isn't much, since everyone knows crossing me means crossing Hale. She looked up. Tonight I got desperate enough to steal. First time in my life I've stolen anything. And Pike caught you. Not exactly a master criminal. Her laugh was bitter. My father built something real. A ranch, a home, a future. And I can't even steal a loaf of bread without getting caught. Your father built something worth stealing, Caleb said quietly. That's why Hale wanted it. That land. It's got water rights, doesn't it? River access? She nodded. And good grazing. Some of the best in the territory. So Hale takes it, adds it to his holdings, controls more of the water supply. Caleb shook his head. Same story, different day. Man gets enough power, he figures the law is just decoration. You sound like you've seen it before. I've seen it everywhere. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the rain. Spent time in Texas, Kansas, Colorado. It's always the same. Big man gets bigger, small folks get pushed out. Sometimes they fight back. Usually they lose. That's a hell of a bedtime story. You want comfort? I'm the wrong person. But his tone softened. You want the truth, though? Here it is. What Hale did to you and your father, it's legal robbery. The worst kind because it's got a judge's signature on it. He turned back to face her. Question is, what are you planning to do about it? Eliza met his eyes. I don't know. I've tried the courts. I've tried appealing to people who knew my father. Nobody wants to stand against Hale. Can't blame them. Hale's got money, guns, and the law on his side. That's a losing hand for most folks. So I should just give up? Let him win? I didn't say that. Caleb returned to his chair. I'm saying you need to think different. Courts didn't work. Public opinion didn't work. What else you got? She wanted to answer, wanted to have some brilliant strategy ready. But the truth was, she'd been running on rage and desperation for so long, she'd stopped thinking past the next day. I don't know, she admitted. I've got a map my father drew, original deed documents I kept hidden, and I've got— She trailed off. What? There's a land office in Cheyenne. Federal, not territorial. My father filed his original claim there back in '67. If those records still exist, that's a big if. It's all I have. She set down her coffee cup. But I need money to get to Cheyenne. Money I don't have. And even if I get there, even if the records exist, what then? I bring them back and the same judge looks at them and says the same thing he said before. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the storm was easing. The rain had gone from a hammer to a steady patter. Your father ever mentioned the Homestead Act? He asked finally. Of course. That's how he claimed the land originally. Right. Federal law, which means federal jurisdiction. Caleb leaned forward. Territorial judges can rule on property disputes, but they can't invalidate federal land grants, not without cause that'd hold up in a higher court. Eliza felt something stir in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. You're saying if I can prove my father's original claim was legitimate, I'm saying maybe you've been fighting in the wrong arena. Hale's got this territory locked down, but he can't buy every federal judge between here and Washington. That's a long shot. Better than no shot at all. She studied him across the firelight. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Caleb was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Your father helped me once. I was breaking horses for a rancher outside Laramie. Man turned out to be running stolen stock. I didn't know. Wouldn't have taken the job if I had. But when the law came looking, I was the one holding his horses. What happened? Thomas vouched for me. Told the marshal I'd worked for him. Said I was honest. The marshal believed him. Caleb looked at her steadily. I owed your father. Now I owe you. That's all. It wasn't all. She could see that in the set of his shoulders, the way he looked away from her after he spoke. There was more to it. Maybe guilt that he hadn't been there when her father died. Maybe his own grievances with men like Hale. But she didn't push. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded, stood. "You should rest. Take the bed. I'll sleep in the chair." "I can't." "You can, and you will. You're half dead already." His tone left no room for argument. "Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Tonight, you sleep." She was too tired to fight him, too tired to do anything but cross the small room, sink onto the bed, which was more comfortable than anything she'd slept on in weeks, and let her eyes close. Sleep came fast, dragged her under like a river current. But just before it took her completely, she heard Caleb moving around the cabin, heard the scrape of his chair as he positioned it between her and the door, heard the quiet click as he checked his rifle, keeping watch. She wanted to tell him it wasn't necessary, wanted to say Pike wouldn't come back, that Hale's men had made their point, but even half asleep, she knew better. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. But Eliza woke to daylight and the smell of bacon. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back, the storm, Pike, Caleb. She sat up too fast, and her ribs reminded her exactly how badly she'd been hurt. "Easy." Caleb's voice came from near the fireplace, where he was cooking. "You've been out 12 hours. Your body's trying to heal." 12 hours. She looked toward the window. Sun was well up. No sign of yesterday's storm except muddy ground and dripping trees. "I should go," she said, swinging her legs off the bed. "Go where?" Good question. She had no answer. Caleb brought over a plate. Bacon, eggs, bread that looked fresh. "Eat first, plan second." Her stomach, which had been empty for days, made the decision for her. She ate. He'd cooked the eggs perfectly, the bacon crisp, and the bread had butter. Real butter, not the rancid lard she'd been scraping from other people's garbage. "This is good," she said around a mouthful. "Don't sound so surprised." But he looked pleased. When she'd finished, cleaned the plate so thoroughly there was nothing left but grease, Caleb refilled her coffee and sat across from her. "I've been thinking about Cheyenne," he said. "You don't have to." "Let me finish." He held up a hand. "You're right that you need those federal records, but riding into Cheyenne alone with Hale's people watching the roads, you wouldn't make it 5 miles. So what are you suggesting?" "I go with you." She stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not using the land I've got, and I've got enough money to get us there and back." He met her eyes. "And because what Hale did to your father is the kind of thing that needs answering." "You'd risk your life for that?" "I've risked my life for less." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to tell him this wasn't his fight. But the truth was, she needed help, needed it desperately, and Caleb was offering it without asking for anything in return. "All right," she said finally, "but if this goes sideways, if it goes sideways, we'll handle it together." Caleb stood, started gathering supplies. "We'll leave tomorrow morning. Take today to rest, get your strength back. I've got preparations to make anyway." "What kind of preparations?" He looked at her, and something in his expression was hard as iron. "The kind where if Hale's men try to stop us, they regret it." "What?" The rest of that day passed in a strange kind of peace. Caleb left her alone in the cabin while he saw to his horses and checked supplies. Eliza slept more, ate more, felt the worst of the bruising start to fade. When evening came, Caleb returned with a canvas bag. "These were my wife's," he said, not quite looking at her. "She died 4 years back. Figured they'd fit you better than my clothes." The bag held practical things: a riding skirt, 2 shirts, undergarments, a coat, all clean, all well made. Eliza ran her fingers over the fabric and felt the weight of what he was trusting her with. "Thank you," she said quietly. He just nodded and turned away, busying himself with the fire. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, venison stew and more of that good bread. Afterward, Eliza helped clean up, and they sat by the fire while Caleb checked over his weapons. "You know how to shoot?" he asked, examining a revolver. "My father taught me." "Good." He held out the gun. "This is yours now. You remember how to load it?" She took the weapon, checked the cylinder, nodded. "Tomorrow," Caleb said. "We ride hard and we ride smart. Stick to back trails where we can. If we run into Hale's men—" "We don't," Eliza finished. We avoid confrontation. Unless they force it. Then we end it fast. He looked at her seriously. You understand what I'm saying? If it comes to shooting, there's no warning shots. No trying to wound. You aim center mass and you don't stop until the threat stops. I understand. I hope we don't have to find out. He set aside the gun he'd been cleaning. But hope's not a plan. That night, Eliza lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to Caleb's breathing from his chair by the door. Tomorrow, they'd start a journey that could give her back everything she'd lost, or could get them both killed. Either way, it was better than dying in the mud. She touched the revolver Caleb had given her, felt its weight, its reality. Her father had taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts, targets that didn't shoot back. She wondered if she could actually pull the trigger when it mattered, when the target was a man who wanted her dead. She'd know soon enough. Outside, a coyote called. Another answered. The sound carried across the dark prairie, lonely and wild. Eliza closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, everything would change. They left before sunrise, when the world was still gray and the cold bit through even Caleb's dead wife's coat. Eliza's breath came out in clouds as she checked the saddle on the mare Caleb had given her, a sturdy bay with kind eyes and a temperament that suggested she'd carried plenty of nervous riders before. She's steady, Caleb said, leading his own horse out of the small barn. Won't spook easy. You remember how to handle rough terrain? I grew up on a ranch. That's not what I asked. Eliza swung into the saddle, and her ribs protested but held. I can handle it. Caleb studied her for a moment, then nodded. He mounted his own horse, a big gray gelding that looked like it could run through a wall without noticing, and pointed southeast. We'll avoid the main road. There's a trail through the foothills that'll take us most of the way. Longer, but quieter. He glanced at her. You feel sick, you get tired, you tell me. Pride's not worth dying over. I'll be fine. Sure you will. But his tone wasn't mocking, just careful. They rode out as the sun broke over the horizon, turning the muddy ground to gold. The storm had scrubbed the air clean, and everything smelled like wet earth and pine. Under different circumstances, Eliza might have enjoyed it. As it was, she kept one hand near the revolver at her hip and her eyes on the trail ahead. The first few hours passed quietly. They stuck to game trails and creek beds, places where the ground was soft enough that their tracks would fade fast. Caleb rode like a man who'd spent his whole life in the saddle, easy, alert, reading the land like it was a book written just for him. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses near a stream. Eliza dismounted stiffly, trying not to show how much everything still hurt. Drink, Caleb said, handing her a canteen, and eat something. She did both. The water was cold and clean. The dried beef he'd packed was tough but edible. How far to Cheyenne? She asked. 3 days if we don't run into trouble. 4 if we do. He scanned the ridge above them. We're still in Hale's territory. Won't be clear of it until tomorrow afternoon. You think he's looking for me? I think Pike told him you're not dead yet. Whether Hale cares enough to send people after you. Caleb shrugged. Depends on how much of a threat he thinks you are. I'm one woman with no money and no proof. You're Thomas Crow's daughter. You know things. You've got documents he thought he'd destroyed. Caleb looked at her directly. Yeah, I'd say he might care. Might. They rode on. The trail climbed into rougher country, all rock and scrub pine. The horses picked their way carefully, and Eliza focused on staying in the saddle, on not letting the pain or exhaustion show. By late afternoon, her whole body ached. The bruises on her ribs had gone from purple to a sick yellow-green, and every jolt of the horse sent fresh waves of hurt through her. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down. Caleb called a halt as the sun started dropping toward the mountains. We'll camp here, he said, indicating a small clearing sheltered by rocks. No fire tonight, we're too exposed. I wasn't planning to ask for one. Good. He dismounted, started unsaddling his horse. We'll eat cold, sleep in shifts. I'll take first watch. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could pull her weight, but the truth was she was barely standing. She took care of her mare, forced down more dried beef and hardtack, then wrapped herself in a blanket and tried to get comfortable against a rock. Sleep should have been impossible. The ground was hard, the cold seeped through the blanket, and every time she shifted, her ribs reminded her they were still healing. But exhaustion won. She drifted off to the sound of Caleb moving quietly around the camp, checking the perimeter. When she woke, it was full dark and Caleb was shaking her shoulder. "Your turn," he said quietly. "Anything moves out there. You wake me. Don't try to be a hero." She nodded, took the rifle he handed her, watched him settle into his own blanket. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out. Eliza sat with her back to the rock and stared into the darkness. The night was full of sounds, wind through the pines, something small moving through the underbrush, the horses shifting and breathing nearby. Every noise made her tense, hand moving to the rifle. But nothing came. The hours crawled past, cold and still. When the sky started to lighten, she woke Caleb. He opened his eyes instantly, fully alert, and she wondered what kind of life had taught him to sleep like that. "Anything?" he asked. "Quiet." "Good." He stood, worked the stiffness from his shoulders. "Let's move. We want to be out of this area before full light." They rode as the world turned from gray to pink to blue. Eliza's body screamed at her, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. 1 mile, then another. The terrain started to flatten out, the pines giving way to open grassland. "We're clear of Hale's usual range," Caleb said around noon. "Doesn't mean we're safe, but it's better." They stopped briefly to water the horses at a creek. Eliza splashed cold water on her face, trying to wake up properly. Her reflection in the water looked like hell, bruised, exhausted, half wild. "You're holding up better than I expected," Caleb said. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "Just an observation." He refilled the canteens. "Most people who've been through what you have, they'd still be in bed, or running the other direction." "Running to where?" Eliza stood, wiped her face with her sleeve. "There's nowhere to run that Hale doesn't have reach, so I might as well run towards something." "That's one way to look at it." They mounted up again. The afternoon stretched out, hot and still. Eliza let her mind drift, thinking about her father, about the ranch as it used to be, the house he'd built with his own hands, the barn he'd raised when she was 10, the pastures where they'd run horses every spring. All of it gone now. Or worse, not gone, but stolen. Twisted into something that served Marcus Hale's empire instead of the life her father had built. "Tell me about him," Caleb said suddenly. "What?" "Your father. You said he taught you to shoot. What else did he teach you?" Eliza was quiet for a moment. "Everything. How to read the weather. How to tell when a horse was sick before it showed symptoms. How to fix a fence, rope a steer, deliver a calf." She smiled despite herself. "How to play poker, and how to lose gracefully." "He sounds like a good man." "He was the best man I ever knew." Her smile faded. "Which is why watching him die knowing he'd lost everything, it broke something in him. At the end, he wasn't himself anymore, just angry and scared and sad." "That's not how you remember him, though." "No." She looked out at the horizon. "I remember him laughing, teaching me to dance even though he had 2 left feet, singing off-key while he worked, building things." She paused. "Making a life out of nothing but dirt and determination. That's worth fighting for. Even if the fight's already lost." Caleb turned in his saddle to look at her. "Is it lost?" "I don't know." Honest answer. "Some days I think I'm just too stubborn to quit. Other days I think stubbornness is all I've got left. Stubbornness and a rightful claim to land worth killing for." Caleb faced forward again. "That's more than most people start with." They rode until dusk, then made another cold camp in a depression that hid them from the road. Eliza's whole body had gone numb, not from cold, but from exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. She ate without tasting, drank without feeling the water, wrapped herself in the blanket and closed her eyes. This time, Caleb didn't wake her for a watch. When she opened her eyes, it was morning and he was already breaking camp. "You should have woken me," she said, sitting up too fast and immediately regretting it. "You needed the sleep more than I needed help watching an empty prairie." He handed her coffee, actual coffee, hot and strong. "Drink that. We've got a long day ahead." The coffee was a miracle. Eliza wrapped both hands around the tin cup and let the warmth seep into her. "Where'd you get this?" "Had a small fire going before dawn. Put it out an hour ago." He saddled his horse with practiced efficiency. "Figured you could use something hot." She wanted to argue that she didn't need special treatment, that she could handle cold camps and hard riding just fine. But the coffee was too good and the gesture too kind. "Thank you," she said simply. They rode out as the sun climbed. The land here was different. Rolling hills and scattered settlements, the occasional ranch house in the distance, signs of civilization, however rough. Around midday, they passed through a small town. Caleb kept them to the outskirts, avoiding the main street. But Eliza caught glimpses of normal life, people working, children playing, a woman hanging laundry. It felt like another world, one where women didn't sleep in the dirt or run from men with guns. "You want to stop?" Caleb asked, noticing her looking. "No." She tore her eyes away. "Let's keep moving." They bought supplies at a general store on the edge of town. More dried goods, coffee, a few cans of beans. The proprietor, an old man with suspicious eyes, watched them carefully but took their money without comment. Back on the trail, Eliza felt the weight of those suspicious eyes following them. "He'll remember us," she said. "Probably." Caleb didn't sound concerned. "But he doesn't know who we are or where we're going. And even if someone asks, all he can say is 2 people bought supplies and rode east." "East toward Cheyenne." "East toward anywhere." Caleb adjusted his hat. "Stop borrowing trouble. We've got enough of our own." That night they made camp in a stand of cottonwoods near a dried-up creek bed. Caleb deemed it safe enough for a small fire, and Eliza nearly wept at the warmth. "You're tougher than you look," Caleb said, heating beans in a pan. "I look pretty tough right now." "You look like you got beat half to death and then rode for 3 days straight." He stirred the beans. "Most people would have quit by now." "Most people have somewhere to quit to." He didn't have an answer for that, just served up the beans with more of that good bread, somehow still edible even after days in his saddlebag, and they ate in comfortable silence. Afterward, Eliza cleaned the pan while Caleb checked the horses. When he came back, he was frowning. "What?" she asked. "Your mare's favoring her left front. Not bad yet, but she's tender." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Can she make it to Cheyenne?" "She can make it, but not at the pace we've been keeping." He crouched by the fire. "We'll need to slow down tomorrow. Give her time to work it out." "That adds another day." "Better than riding her lame." Caleb met her eyes. "I know you're in a hurry, but a lame horse out here is as good as being on foot, and you don't want to be on foot in this country." He was right. She knew he was right, but the delay felt like failure. "All right," she said. "We slow down." That night, she took first watch without being asked, sat with the rifle across her knees, and stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Somewhere out there was Cheyenne, and in Cheyenne, maybe, was proof that her father's land was legally hers, that everything Hale had built on stolen ground could come crashing down. Or maybe there was nothing. Maybe the records had been lost or destroyed. Maybe this whole trip was just a way to feel like she was doing something instead of giving up. "Stop thinking so loud," Caleb said from his bedroll. "I can hear you from here." "I thought you were asleep." "Can't sleep when you're broadcasting anxiety like a church bell." He sat up, looked at her across the fire. "What's eating you?" "What if we get there and there's nothing? Then we figure out the next move." "What if there is no next move?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "You want the truth?" "Always." "There's always a next move. Always. Even if it's just surviving another day." He lay back down. "Your father didn't raise a quitter, so quit acting like one." The words should have stung. Instead, they settled something in her chest, straightened her spine. "You're right," she said. "Usually am." His voice was already getting drowsy. "Wake me in a few hours." She did. And when she finally slept, she didn't dream. The next day dawned clear and cold. They rode slower, mindful of the mare's tender hoof. Caleb checked it twice during rest stops, and by afternoon he declared it improving. "She'll be fine by tomorrow," he said. "Good timing, too. We should reach Cheyenne by evening." Eliza felt her heart rate pick up. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. They made camp early, in a grove of aspens that shivered in the breeze. Caleb built a proper fire this time, and they had hot food and coffee. "What's the plan when we get there?" Eliza asked. "Find the land office. See what records they've got." Caleb poked at the fire with a stick. "If we're lucky, your father's original claim is on file and clear as day." And if we're not lucky, we deal with it. He looked at her. You've got your father's maps, right? The ones he drew? She patted her jacket pocket. Never leave my side. Good. Those might be enough to corroborate whatever we find, or they might be worthless. He shrugged. Won't know until we know. You're very comforting. I'm very honest. But he smiled slightly. Look, whatever happens tomorrow, you're further ahead than you were a week ago. You're alive, you're fighting back, and you're not alone. That counts for something. Does it? It does to me. Eliza studied him across the fire. Why are you really doing this? I told you. No, not the debt to my father, the real reason. She leaned forward. You could have just given me money, sent me on my way. Instead, you're riding into potential danger with a woman you barely know, for a cause that's not yours. Caleb was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. My wife died because of men like Hale. Different territory, different name, same type. He stared into the fire. She had family land. Nothing big, but it was hers, legal, proper. Then a mining company decided they wanted it. Made her an offer. She said no. They made her another offer. She said no again. He paused. Eliza waited. They burned our cabin while I was gone. She was inside. His jaw worked. By the time the law got involved, the mining company had paperwork saying she'd sold, forged signature, bought witnesses, the whole thing. I tried to fight it, spent 2 years trying, got nowhere. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. Don't be sorry, just understand. He looked at her. I couldn't save her, couldn't get her justice, but maybe I can help you get yours. Maybe that counts for something. It counts for everything. They sat in silence after that. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, a nightbird called. Finally, Caleb stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we find out if this was all worth it. Eliza lay down, but sleep was slow coming. Her mind kept running through possibilities. The records would be there. They wouldn't be there. They'd be incomplete. They'd be perfect. Hale would have somehow gotten to them first. The land office would refuse to help. Round and round. When she finally slept, she dreamed of her father. He was standing in front of the ranch house, young and strong, and he was smiling at her. You did good, Ellie, he said. Real good. She woke with tears on her face and the sun just starting to rise. Today was the day. They reached Cheyenne just before sunset. The town was bigger than anything Eliza had seen in years. Real buildings, paved streets, people everywhere. After days in the wilderness, it felt overwhelming. Land office will be closed by now, Caleb said, guiding them toward a stable. We'll find somewhere to sleep, hit it first thing in the morning. They boarded the horses at a stable run by a taciturn woman who barely looked at them, paid for 2 nights just in case. Then Caleb led Eliza to a boarding house on a quiet street. 2 rooms, he told the landlady, a round woman with sharp eyes. Just for tonight. Supper's at 6 if you want it, the woman said, handing over keys. No loud noises after 10. Eliza's room was small but clean. A real bed, a washstand, a window that looked out on the street. After days of sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. She washed her face, changed into the cleanest of the shirts Caleb had given her, and met him downstairs for supper. The meal was simple but good: roast chicken, potatoes, bread. They ate at a long table with other boarders, and Eliza kept her head down, not wanting conversation. Afterward, Caleb walked her back upstairs. Try to sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. What if? No what ifs tonight. His tone was firm but kind. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we fight. She nodded, went into her room, lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd know. One way or another, she'd know if this whole desperate gamble had been worth it, if her father's legacy could be saved, if she had any chance at all. Outside, Cheyenne settled into night. Sounds of laughter from a saloon down the street, horses clopping past, someone playing a fiddle badly. Normal life. Going on all around her while she lay there trying to breathe through the fear. She must have slept eventually, because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking on her door, and pale morning light was streaming through the window. Eliza. Caleb's voice. Time to go. She sat up, heart already racing, splashed water on her face, checked her reflection, still bruised, still tired, but her eyes were clear, ready. She opened the door. Caleb stood there, already dressed, looking like he'd been up for hours. "The land office opens at 8, he said. "We should eat first, keep our strength up." They had breakfast in near silence. Eggs, bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Eliza forced herself to eat even though her stomach was in knots. At 7:45, they left the boarding house and walked through the waking streets of Cheyenne. The land office was a squat brick building near the center of town, with a sign that read Federal Land Claims Bureau. They waited outside as the clock in the town square chimed 8. A moment later, a clerk in a green eyeshade unlocked the door. "Help you?" he asked, looking them over with thinly veiled skepticism. "I need to access land claim records," Eliza said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "From 1867. The clerk sighed like she'd asked him to move a mountain. "Name of the claimant?" "Thomas Crow. Land in Wyoming Territory near. I know how to look it up." He gestured them inside. "This is going to take some time. We've got thousands of records." "We'll wait," Caleb said. The clerk disappeared into a back room. Eliza and Caleb sat on hard wooden chairs and waited. Minutes crawled by, then an hour, then another. Eliza's nerves were scraped raw by the time the clerk finally reappeared, carrying a dusty ledger. "Thomas Crow," he said, opening the book. "Homestead claim filed April 1867. Land description." He read off coordinates that matched her father's maps exactly. Claim approved and filed June 1867. No disputes on record, no transfers, no... He looked up, frowning. "No sales or forfeitures listed." Eliza's heart stopped. What does that mean? "It means as far as the federal government is concerned, Thomas Crow still owns that land." The clerk looked between them. "Or his legal heir does, if he's deceased." "He's deceased," Eliza said. "I'm his daughter, his only heir." The clerk made a note. "You'll need to file for transfer of title. Bring a death certificate and proof of relation. Then, what about claims by others?" Caleb interrupted. "Would those show up in your records?" "Any legitimate claim would. Has to be filed with us to be federal." The clerk checked the ledger again. "There's nothing here. As far as we're concerned, this land isn't in dispute." Eliza felt lightheaded. "Can you give me a copy of that record?" "Cost you $2. She paid it gladly. Watched as the clerk made a careful copy of the filing, stamped it with an official seal, handed it over. "This proves my father's claim was legitimate," she said, staring at the paper. "Proves it's on file with us," the clerk corrected. "What the territorial courts do with it, that's their business. But yeah, according to federal law, that land belongs to the Crow estate." They left the office in a daze, stood on the street outside, and Eliza looked at the document in her hands like it might disappear. "We did it," she said. You did it." Caleb's smile was genuine. "This is proof, Eliza. Real proof." "What do I do now?" "Now?" He thought for a moment. "Now we figure out how to use this. Because Hale's not going to just roll over because you've got federal paperwork." "No." Eliza folded the document carefully, tucked it inside her jacket. "He's going to fight." "Let him fight." Caleb's voice was hard. "You've got the law on your side now. That changes everything." They started walking back toward the boarding house. Eliza's mind was racing, already planning the next steps. She'd need to file the transfer of title, get copies made, maybe find a lawyer who wasn't in Hale's pocket. She was so lost in thought that she almost walked right into the man standing in her path. Almost. She stopped just in time, looked up. Pike stood there, grinning like a wolf. "Miss Crow," he said pleasantly. "Fancy meeting you here." Eliza's hand went to the revolver at her hip before she could think. Caleb shifted beside her, positioning himself slightly in front of her, his own hand resting casually near his gun. Pike noticed. His grin widened. "Easy now," he said, holding up both hands in mock surrender. "I'm not here for trouble. Just happened to be in town on business and saw you two walking by." His eyes flicked to Caleb. "Rourke, isn't it? Heard you were keeping company with Miss Crow here." "Interesting choice." "What do you want, Pike?" Caleb's voice was flat. "Like I said, just passing through. Though I have to admit, I'm curious what brings you both to Cheyenne." Pike's eyes gleamed with something ugly. "Sightseeing? Or maybe conducting some business at that land office you just walked out of?" Eliza's blood went cold. He'd been watching them. Our business is our own, she said. Sure, free country and all that. Pike stepped closer, and Caleb moved to block him. Pike stopped, still smiling. Thing is, Mr. Hale asked me to keep an eye out for you. Said you might try something desperate. Didn't believe you'd actually make it this far, but here we are. We're done talking, Caleb said. Move aside. Or what? You'll shoot me in the middle of Main Street, in front of all these witnesses? Pike gestured at the people passing by, most of whom were pointedly ignoring the confrontation. You're smarter than that, Rourke. Maybe. Caleb's hand stayed near his gun. But I'm also tired and running low on patience, so I'll say it one more time. Move. For a moment, Pike looked like he might push it. His eyes went hard, calculating. Then he stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. By all means, wouldn't want to delay you. He tipped his hat to Eliza. Miss Crow, I'll be sure to let Mr. Hale know you're doing so well. He'll be pleased to hear it. They walked past him, and Eliza felt his eyes on her back like a target. She didn't look back, didn't run, just kept walking with Caleb at her side until they turned the corner. He knows, she said quietly. Yeah. Caleb kept scanning the street. Question is, what's he going to do about it? Tell Hale. Who'll send more men? Probably. Caleb steered them toward a busier street. We need to move fast, get those copies made, file the transfer papers, and get out of town before Hale can organize a response. That'll take days. Then we make it take hours. He looked at her. How badly do you want this? You know how badly. Then we don't sleep until it's done. They spent the rest of the day in a blur of bureaucracy. Eliza filed for transfer of title at the land office, paid the fees, provided what documentation she had. The clerk, a different one this time, older and more sympathetic, helped her navigate the forms. This should hold up, he said, stamping the final page. You've got federal claim, clear inheritance, no disputes on record. Any territorial judge who tries to overturn this will have a hell of a time justifying it. What about existing territorial rulings? Eliza asked. If someone already claimed the land through the territorial courts? The clerk scratched his chin. Well, that gets messy. Federal law supersedes territorial law, but enforcing it, he trailed off. Let's just say you might need a federal marshal to back you up. Where do I find one of those? Marshal's office is 3 blocks west. But fair warning, they don't intervene in local disputes unless there's clear evidence of federal law being violated. And if there is, then you might have a chance. He handed her a stack of papers. Good luck, miss. You're going to need it. They left with arms full of official documents, all stamped and signed and legal. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the start of a war. Marshal's office next? Eliza asked. Caleb checked the position of the sun. It's almost 5. They'll be closing soon. We go now or wait until tomorrow? Now, I'm not spending another night in this town with Pike watching. The marshal's office was a small building that smelled like tobacco and old coffee. Behind a battered desk sat a man in his 50s wearing a federal badge and an expression of profound boredom. Help you? He asked without looking up from his paperwork. I need to report a federal land claim violation, Eliza said. That got his attention. He looked up, studied her with sharp gray eyes. Go on. She laid out the whole story. Her father's original claim, Hale's seizure of the land, the forged documents, the territorial court ruling that had ignored federal records. The marshal listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he sat back in his chair. You got proof of all this? She handed over the documents from the land office. He read through them carefully, taking his time. This is federal claim, all right, clear as day. He looked at her. And you're saying a territorial judge ruled against it? Judge Warren, in the town near my father's land. He said the documents I brought weren't sufficient. Did you bring these documents? He tapped the federal papers. No, I didn't know they existed. I only had my father's personal records, maps, receipts, witness statements. The marshal nodded slowly. And this Hale character, he have the territorial deed? He says he does. Claims my father signed the land over to settle debts. Did your father owe debts? Some, but he'd never sign over the land, never. Her voice cracked slightly. That land was everything to him. The marshal was quiet for a moment. Here's the situation. You've got federal claim, that's solid. But I can't just ride into another jurisdiction and overturn a territorial ruling without cause. Isn't federal claim cause enough? Should be, but the law's complicated. He leaned forward. What I can do is accompany you back to your territory and ensure that these federal documents are properly presented to the territorial court. If the judge still rules against clear federal claim, then we've got grounds for federal intervention. And if he does rule against it, then I arrest him for obstruction of federal law and we take this to a higher court. The marshal smiled grimly. Judges don't like being arrested, tends to change their perspective. Hope flared in Eliza's chest. When can we leave? Day after tomorrow. I've got business to wrap up here first. He stood, extended his hand. Marshal William Grant. I'll meet you at the staging post, dawn 2 days from now. Bring everything you've got. Eliza shook his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This could still go sideways. But his grip was firm, and his eyes were honest. 2 days. Don't be late. Outside, the sun was setting. Eliza felt like she could breathe for the first time in hours. We did it, she said. We actually did it. Step 1, Caleb corrected. Now we've got to survive long enough to finish. They made their way back to the boarding house through streets that were starting to empty. Eliza kept expecting to see Pike around every corner, but he didn't appear. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made her nervous. At the boarding house, the landlady informed them that supper was over, but she could heat up some leftovers if they were hungry. They accepted gratefully and ate in the empty dining room, cold chicken and bread that tasted like the best meal Eliza had ever had. What do we do for the next 2 days? She asked. Stay alert, stay together, don't go anywhere alone. Caleb pushed his plate aside. Pike knows we're here. That means Hale knows. And Hale's not going to just let this happen. You think he'll try something in Cheyenne? I think he'll try something somewhere, Caleb stood. Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. You can't stay awake for 2 days straight. I've done worse. He looked tired, and Eliza realized he'd been carrying most of the weight of keeping them safe this whole trip. We'll trade off, she said firmly. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. You first. He looked like he might argue, then nodded. Wake me at midnight. Eliza went to her room, lay down fully clothed with the revolver under her pillow. She didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion dragged her under anyway. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder, sat up fast, hand going for the gun. Easy. Caleb stepped back. Just me. It's midnight. She'd slept through the whole 4 hours, felt like she'd barely closed her eyes. Anything happen? Quiet as a grave. He handed her his rifle. I'll be next door if you need me. He left, and Eliza positioned herself by the window where she could see the street. The town was dark and still. A few oil lamps burned in windows. A cat prowled past, hunting. Nothing else moved. She stayed there for 4 hours, watching, waiting. When the clock downstairs chimed 4, she woke Caleb and collapsed back into bed. The pattern repeated the next day. Sleep in shifts, watch the streets, stay inside as much as possible. By evening, Eliza was crawling out of her skin with nervous energy. I need to move, she told Caleb. I need to do something or I'm going to lose my mind. You want to go for a walk? We'll go for a walk. He checked his gun. But we stay on main streets where there's people. They walked through the evening crowds, past saloons and shops, and people going about their normal lives. It should have been relaxing. Instead, every shadow looked like a threat. They were heading back to the boarding house when Eliza saw him. Not Pike this time. Someone else. A man in a long coat, watching them from across the street. When she looked directly at him, he didn't look away. Caleb, she said quietly. I see him. Caleb kept walking. Keep moving, don't run. The man followed, not obviously, just staying parallel to them on the other side of the street. Is he one of Hale's? Don't know, but I don't like it. Caleb steered them down a busier street. The man followed. They turned another corner. The man kept pace. How do you want to handle this? Eliza asked. We get back to the boarding house, lock ourselves in. If he tries something... The man crossed the street, started walking directly toward them. Caleb's hand went to his gun. Eliza reached for hers. The man stopped a few feet away, hands visible and empty. Miss Crow? He said. Eliza's heart hammered. Who's asking? Name's Carter. I work for your neighbor, Mrs. Jameson. She asked me to find you if I could. Eliza's mind raced. Mrs. Jameson had been one of the witnesses who'd testified about her father's land claim. The territorial court had dismissed her testimony as unreliable. "What does she want?" Eliza asked carefully. "She heard you were in Cheyenne, wanted me to give you this." He held out an envelope. "Said it was important." Caleb took it, opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in neat handwriting. He read it, then handed it to Eliza. The letter was brief. "Miss Crow, I have documents your father gave me for safekeeping before he died. Papers he said might be important if anything happened to him. I didn't bring them to court because Judge Warren made it clear he didn't want to hear from me. But if you still need them, they're yours. Come to my home or send word. E. Jameson." Eliza looked up at Carter. "When did she write this?" "2 days ago. Heard you were headed this way and asked me to track you down." He shifted his weight. "She's a good woman. Felt bad about what happened with your father's land." "Tell her thank you," Eliza said. "Tell her I'll come see her as soon as I can." Carter nodded, tipped his hat, and walked away. Eliza stared at the letter in her hands. "More documents," she said. "Whatever my father gave her for safekeeping. Could be important, could be nothing." Caleb started walking again. "But Mrs. Jameson lives near your father's land, doesn't she?" "About 5 miles from it. So to get these documents, we'd have to go back into Hale's territory." "Yes." Eliza folded the letter carefully. "But if these papers prove forgery, if they show Hale's fraud, then we've got him." Caleb looked grim. "Or we walk into a trap and get ourselves killed." "You think Mrs. Jameson would set a trap?" "I think Hale could force her to. Threaten her family, burn her house, same way he does everything else." Eliza hadn't thought of that. But he was right. Mrs. Jameson was an old woman living alone. She'd be easy to pressure. "So what do we do?" "We stick to the plan. Meet Marshal Grant day after tomorrow. Show him what we've got. Then, if he thinks it's worth the risk, we go get those documents with federal protection." It made sense. It was the smart play. But something in Eliza wanted to go now, wanted to ride out tonight and get whatever her father had left for her. "Okay," she said. "We wait." That night, sleep was impossible. Eliza lay in bed and thought about her father, about what he might have known or suspected before he died. What documents had he thought important enough to hide with a neighbor? When dawn finally came, she was already dressed and packed. One more day. Then they'd leave Cheyenne with a federal marshal and the law on their side. One more day. She met Caleb downstairs for breakfast. The boarding house was busy with guests, and they found a corner table where they could watch the room. "How'd you sleep?" Caleb asked. "I didn't." "Same." He looked as tired as she felt. "One more night, then we're gone." They spent the day the same as the last one, staying inside, watching the streets, trading watch shifts. By evening, Eliza was ready to climb the walls. "I'm going for a walk," she announced. "Like hell you are." "Caleb, I've been locked in this room for 2 days. I need air. I need to move." She stood. "I'm going. You can come with me or not." He muttered something unflattering under his breath but grabbed his coat. They walked to the edge of town where buildings gave way to open ground. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. Eliza breathed deep, let the cool air fill her lungs. "Better?" Caleb asked. "Better." She looked at him. "Thank you for everything. I know I haven't said it enough, but you don't need to thank me." "Yeah, I do." She turned to face him properly. "You saved my life, more than once. You've risked everything to help me get this far. I won't forget that." Caleb looked uncomfortable. "Your father would have done the same for me." "Maybe, but you're not doing this for him." "Not really." She paused. "You're doing it because it's right. Because someone should stand up to men like Hale." "Someone should." He met her eyes. "Might as well be us." They stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars came out. For a moment, Eliza let herself imagine that this might actually work, that she might get her land back, that Hale might face justice, that her father's legacy might be restored. It felt dangerous to hope, but she couldn't help it. "Tomorrow we ride with a federal marshal," she said. "Tomorrow, everything changes." "Tomorrow we find out if the law still means something," Caleb corrected. "Don't get ahead of yourself." But even he sounded hopeful. They walked back to the boarding house through darkening streets. Most of the shops were closed and the saloons were getting rowdy. Normal evening sounds in a frontier town. They were half a block from the boarding house when the first shot rang out. Eliza hit the ground on instinct, rolling behind a water trough. Caleb dove the opposite direction, coming up with his gun already drawn. A second shot. This one sparked off the trough inches from Eliza's head. There! Caleb fired toward a rooftop across the street. Someone yelped and ducked. Eliza drew her own revolver, trying to see where the shots were coming from. The street had emptied fast, people diving for cover, disappearing into buildings. Another shot. This one from a different angle. They were flanked. Move! Caleb fired twice more, then ran in a crouch toward the nearest building. Eliza followed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. They made it to a doorway just as two more shots tore chunks out of the doorframe. How many? Eliza gasped. At least 3. Maybe more. Caleb reloaded with steady hands. This is Hale. Has to be. In the middle of town? He's desperate. Or he thinks we're carrying something he wants. Caleb leaned out, fired, ducked back. We need to get to the marshal's office. That's 4 blocks away. You got a better idea? She didn't. On 3, Caleb said. We run. You shoot anyone who tries to stop us. Don't hesitate. Don't aim careful. Just shoot. Okay. 1. He checked his gun. 2. He looked at her, and something in his face was fierce and protective and absolutely certain. 3. They ran. Eliza fired blindly at the rooftops as they moved, just trying to keep the shooters' heads down. Caleb ran beside her, shooting with more precision, and she heard someone cry out, 50 yards, 40. A man stepped out of an alley ahead of them, rifle raised. Eliza shot without thinking. The man spun and fell. She'd never shot anyone before, never pulled the trigger with a person on the other end. There wasn't time to feel sick about it. 30 yards, 20. The marshal's office appeared ahead. Caleb put on a burst of speed, hit the door hard, and it crashed open. Eliza tumbled in behind him just as another shot punched through the door above her head. Marshal Grant stood behind his desk, gun already drawn. What in the hell? Hale's men, Caleb gasped. At least 3 shooters. They ambushed us. Grant moved fast for a man his age. He crossed to the window, looked out carefully. I see 2 on the roof across the street, 1 in the alley. He looked back at them. You 2 hit? No, Eliza said. Her voice shook. But I think I shot someone. Good. Grant grabbed a rifle from a rack on the wall. Stay down. I'll handle this. He stepped out the door and fired 3 times in quick succession. Eliza heard shouts, running footsteps. Grant came back inside. They're running. Probably didn't expect federal law to get involved. They tried to kill us, Eliza said. The reality of it was just hitting her. In the middle of town. They're getting desperate. Grant set his rifle down. Which means you've got them scared. That's good and bad. Feels mostly bad right now, Caleb muttered. Change of plans, Grant said. We're leaving tonight. Now. Before Hale can organize another attempt. It's dark, Eliza protested. We won't make it 2 miles. We'll make it further than you will if you stay here. Grant was already gathering supplies. I've got horses in the stable behind this building. We pack light, ride hard, and we're across the territorial line before morning. And then what? Then we ride straight to your father's land and we settle this. Grant looked at her steadily. You ready for that? Was she? Ready to ride back into Hale's territory, to face him directly, to risk everything on a federal marshal's word and a stack of papers. She thought of her father, of the land he'd built, of Pike's boot on her back and the mud in her mouth, and every humiliation she'd endured. I'm ready, she said. Good. Grant handed her a rifle. Because this is about to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. They left through this back door, moving fast through dark alleys to the stable. Grant's horses were ready, good stock, already saddled like he'd been expecting trouble. They rode out of Cheyenne as the town bells started ringing, people shouting about the shooting. No one tried to stop them. No one even saw them leave. The moon was up, half full, giving just enough light to see the trail. Grant set a hard pace, and Eliza focused on staying in the saddle, on keeping up. Behind them, Cheyenne faded into the darkness. Ahead, somewhere in the night, was her father's land. And Marcus Hale. And finally, after months of running and hiding and barely surviving, Eliza was riding toward him instead of away. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. They rode through the night without stopping. Grant set a punishing pace, and the horses held up better than Eliza did. By the time dawn started breaking, her whole body ached and her eyes felt full of sand. "We'll rest soon," Grant called back. "Another hour." That hour felt like 10. But finally, as the sun cleared the horizon, Grant led them off the trail into a small canyon with a creek running through it. "Water the horses," he said, dismounting. "Eat something. We've got another hard day ahead." Eliza slid out of the saddle and nearly collapsed. Her legs had gone numb. Caleb caught her elbow, steadied her. "You all right?" "Just tired." She managed to stand on her own. "I'm fine." They saw to the horses first, then ate dried meat and hardtack while Grant studied a map. "We're making better time than I expected," he said. "If we keep this pace, we'll reach your father's land by tomorrow evening." "And then?" Eliza asked. "Then we find Judge Warren and we present your federal claim, along with me standing there in a federal badge." Grant folded the map. "If he's smart, he'll reverse his ruling and transfer the land back to you. And if he's not smart, then I arrest him and we take this to the territorial governor." Grant's smile was grim. "Either way, Hale loses." It sounded too easy, too simple. "Hale won't just let this happen," Caleb said, voicing what Eliza was thinking. "He'll fight." "Let him fight. He's got guns and money. I've got federal authority." Grant stood. "We rest for 2 hours, then we ride." Eliza found a spot in the shade and tried to sleep. Her mind wouldn't settle. She kept seeing that man in the alley, the one she'd shot. Kept wondering if he'd lived or died. Kept telling herself it didn't matter, that it was him or her. But it mattered. She must have dozed eventually because Caleb was shaking her shoulder and the sun had moved. "Time to go," he said. They mounted up and rode on. The land around them started looking familiar, the specific shape of distant mesas, the way the creek bent, the scattered cottonwoods. They were getting close. As afternoon faded to evening, Grant called a halt. "We'll camp here tonight. Go in fresh tomorrow morning." He looked at Eliza. "You know where Judge Warren lives?" "In town, above the general store." "And Hale?" "He's got a big house 5 miles west of town, near my father's land." "Her land," she corrected herself. "Her land. We'll go to the judge first, get the ruling reversed, then we'll deal with Hale." Grant started setting up camp. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's the day everything comes to a head." Eliza lay in her bedroll and stared up at the stars. Tomorrow. After everything, after all the running and fighting and bleeding, tomorrow she'd stand in front of Judge Warren with federal law on her side and demand justice. She wondered what her father would think, if he'd be proud or worried, or both. She fell asleep thinking of him, and in her dreams, he was smiling. They rode into town just after sunrise, when the streets were still mostly empty except for a few shopkeepers opening up and a dog nosing through trash behind the saloon. Eliza felt eyes on them immediately, people peering through windows, a man sweeping the boardwalk who stopped mid-stroke to stare. News would reach Hale within the hour, maybe sooner. Grant didn't seem concerned. He rode straight down the main street like he owned it, badge catching the morning light. Caleb stayed close to Eliza, hand resting near his gun. They tied their horses in front of the general store. The building looked exactly as Eliza remembered. Weathered wood, fading paint, a sign that read, "Warren's General Goods and Sundries." Judge Warren owned the store. Ran it when he wasn't presiding over the territorial court in the back room. Grant dismounted, straightened his coat. "Let me do the talking. You back me up with documentation when I ask for it. Otherwise, stay quiet." "What if he refuses?" Eliza asked. "He won't." Grant's voice was hard. "Not with me standing there." They climbed the exterior stairs to the second floor where Warren kept his living quarters. Grant knocked firmly on the door. Nothing. He knocked again, harder. A woman's voice came from inside. "Who is it?" "Federal Marshal William Grant. I need to speak with Judge Warren. Official business." A pause. Then the door opened a crack, and a pale woman in a faded dressing gown peered out. Mrs. Warren. Eliza recognized her from town gatherings years ago. "The judge isn't here," Mrs. Warren said. "He left before dawn. Said he had business at the Hale Ranch. Grant's jaw tightened. When will he be back?
He didn't say.
Mrs. Warren's eyes flicked to Eliza, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or pity. You might try the ranch. It's about 5 miles west. I know where it is, Grant said. Thank you, ma'am. They descended the stairs. On the street below, more people had appeared. Word was spreading fast. He ran, Caleb said quietly. Soon as he heard you were coming, or Hale summoned him. Grant untied his horse. Either way, we're going to the ranch. If Warren's there, we'll serve him the federal documents in front of Hale. If he's not, we'll deal with Hale directly. That's a bad idea, Eliza said. Hale's got maybe 20 men working for him, all armed. We ride in there. We ride in there with federal authority. Grant swung into the saddle. Hale can have 100 men. Doesn't change the law. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to point out that the law hadn't protected her father or anyone else who'd stood against Hale. But Grant was already riding, and staying here meant giving up. They headed west out of town. The road was familiar. Eliza had ridden it 1,000 times growing up. Past the Turner place, now abandoned. Past the creek where she'd learned to fish. Past the fence line that marked the edge of what used to be her father's land. Her land, she reminded herself. Still her land according to federal law. The Hale Ranch appeared in the distance, a sprawling house, multiple barns, corrals full of cattle and horses. It had been a modest operation when Hale first arrived in the territory 10 years ago. Now it looked like a small empire, built on stolen ground. As they approached, men appeared from the barns and bunkhouse, not threatening yet, but watching, counting. Eliza counted too. She saw at least 15, and there were probably more inside. Grant rode straight to the main house and dismounted. Before he could knock, the door opened. Marcus Hale stood in the doorway. Eliza had seen him before, of course. At her father's funeral, all false sympathy, an expensive suit. In the courthouse, sitting behind the prosecutor with that satisfied smile. But she'd never been this close, never looked him in the eye directly. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 45, with graying hair and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. He wore ranch clothes, but they were too clean, too new. A man playing at being a cattleman. Marshal Grant? Hale said pleasantly. This is unexpected. What brings federal law to my doorstep? I'm looking for Judge Warren. I was told he came out here this morning. Did he? Hale's expression didn't change. I haven't seen him. Perhaps your information was mistaken. Perhaps. Grant's tone made it clear he didn't believe that for a second. While I'm here, though, I have some documents to deliver concerning land ownership in this territory. Really? Hale's eyes flicked to Eliza. Miss Crow, I heard you were in Cheyenne. Caused quite a bit of excitement from what I understand. Eliza kept her mouth shut. Let Grant handle this. The excitement, Grant said, was attempted murder. Miss Crow was ambushed by gunmen, in broad daylight, on a federal street. How terrible, Hale's voice dripped false concern. I hope you caught the responsible parties. Working on it. Grant pulled out the documents from the federal land office. In the meantime, I'm here to inform you that the land you currently claim, specifically the former Crow homestead, has been verified as federal claim belonging to Thomas Crow, filed and approved in 1867. As Mr. Crow is deceased, ownership transfers to his legal heir, Eliza Crow. Hale took the documents, barely glanced at them. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Marshal. I have a legitimate deed to this property, signed by Thomas Crow himself, witnessed and notarized. The territorial court has already ruled on this matter. Federal law supersedes territorial court in matters of land claims. Grant's voice didn't rise, but it got harder. The territorial ruling is void. Is it? Hale handed the documents back. I think you'll find that Judge Warren, who presides over this territory, might disagree, as would the territorial governor and the land commissioner, all of whom have reviewed my claim and found it legitimate. All of whom are in your pocket, Eliza said before she could stop herself. Hale's smile widened. Miss Crow, still making wild accusations, I see. Your father had the same problem, couldn't accept when he'd lost. My father didn't lose, you stole from him. I purchased land from a desperate man who owed more than he could pay. That's not theft. That's business. Hale's tone was condescending, like explaining something to a child. I understand you're emotional. Grief can cloud judgment. But the facts are clear. This land is mine, legally acquired and properly documented. With forged papers, Eliza said. Prove it. Hale's eyes went cold. Oh, wait, you can't. Because you have no proof. Just conspiracy theories and a dead man's land that you couldn't hold on to. Grant stepped between them. Mr. Hale, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to inform you that federal records show clear ownership by the Crow estate. You can dispute that in federal court if you choose. But until you do, this land legally belongs to Miss Crow. The territorial court has already ruled otherwise. Then the territorial court is in violation of federal law. Bold claim. Hale looked past Grant to his men, who had drifted closer during the conversation. Tell me, Marshal, how exactly do you plan to enforce this? You going to arrest me, evict me from my own property? If necessary.
Hale laughed. You and what army? You're one man. I've got 20 armed employees who'll testify that you're trespassing and threatening a lawful landowner. Who do you think the territorial authorities will believe? The territorial authorities don't override federal law. Maybe not in theory. Hale's smile was razor thin. But in practice, out here, federal law is whatever I say it is. The men around them shifted. Hands drifted toward guns. The air got thick with tension.
Caleb moved his horse slightly, positioning himself with a clear line of fire. Eliza's hand went to her revolver. Grant didn't move. Didn't blink. You threatening a federal officer, Mr. Hale? Not at all, just stating facts. Hale gestured broadly. You're welcome to take this to a higher court. File whatever complaints you want. But until a federal judge tells me otherwise, in person, with an eviction order, I'm staying right here on land I legally own. The documents mean nothing without enforcement, and you can't enforce them. Not here, not now. Hale's voice went hard. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horses and ride out of here. Miss Crow can file whatever appeals she wants in whatever courts will hear her. But this land stays mine until a court with actual power says different. That's not how this works, Grant said. That's exactly how this works. Hale stepped back toward his door. You've delivered your documents. You've stated your case. Now get off my property before I have you removed for trespassing. You can't I? Hale looked at his men. Boys, the marshal and his friends are leaving now. Make sure they find their way out. Politely, of course. The men closed in. Not threatening, not yet. But their message was clear. Grant's hand went to his gun. So did Caleb's. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Grant exhaled slowly. This isn't over, Hale. No, it's not, Hale's smile returned. But it's over for today. Good luck getting anyone in this territory to enforce your federal claim. I own the judge. I own the sheriff. I own everyone who matters. He looked at Eliza. Your father learned that the hard way. I'd hoped you'd be smarter. My father was murdered by your greed, Eliza said. Her voice shook, but not with fear, with rage. And you're going to pay for it. With what? Hale laughed. You've got nothing. You are nothing, just like he was nothing in the end. He turned to go back inside. See them out, boys, and make sure Miss Crow understands. If she sets foot on my land again, she'll be arrested for trespassing. The door closed. The men continued to close in, rifles held casually but ready. Marshal, one of them said, time to go. Grant looked like he wanted to shoot someone, but he was one man facing 20. The math was simple. Let's go, he said quietly. They rode out surrounded by Hale's men, escorted like criminals off the property. None of Hale's people said anything, but their presence was message enough. This was Hale's territory, his rules. When they reached the property line, the men stopped, watched as Grant, Caleb, and Eliza kept riding. A mile down the road, Grant finally spoke. He's right about one thing. I can't enforce federal law here without backup. The territorial authorities won't help, and by the time I get federal reinforcements, Hale will have filed 100 counterclaims and buried this in legal proceedings for years. So what do we do? Eliza asked. Her earlier hope had curdled into something bitter and familiar. Defeat. We don't give up. Grant pulled his horse to a stop. But we need a different approach, something Hale can't buy or shoot his way out of. Like what? Grant was quiet, thinking. Then his eyes sharpened. That neighbor of yours, Mrs. Jameson, the one who has your father's documents, where exactly does she live? About 5 miles east of here, near the river. And Hale doesn't know about these documents?
I don't think so. My father gave them to her right before he died. Told her to keep them safe. Then that's our play. Grant started writing again. We get those documents. If they prove forgery like you think, we've got grounds for criminal charges. Not just a land dispute, actual fraud. That changes everything.
How? Because fraud is a federal crime, which means federal jurisdiction, which means I can arrest Hale regardless of what the territorial courts say. Grant looked at her. Can you get to Mrs. Jameson's place without being seen? Maybe. There's back trails through the river valley. Then that's what we do, tonight after dark. We get the documents, we build a case, and we come back with enough evidence to take Hale down. It wasn't the quick victory Eliza had hoped for, but it was something. All right, she said, tonight. They spent the day camped in a wooded area off the main road, out of sight. Grant kept watch while Caleb checked their weapons and supplies. Eliza tried to rest but couldn't. Her mind kept replaying the confrontation with Hale, the smug certainty in his voice. He thinks he's won, she said. Caleb looked up from cleaning his rifle. He thinks he's safe because he's bought everyone in power. He's not wrong about that. So how do we beat him? We make him not safe. Caleb set the rifle aside. Men like Hale, they're dangerous because they're protected. Take away the protection, they're just bullies, and bullies break when you hit them hard enough. You sound like you've done this before. I've seen it done. Seen men who thought they were untouchable get brought low. His expression darkened. Doesn't always work. Sometimes the bad guys win, but sometimes they don't. Which do you think this is? Caleb looked at her steadily. I think you're not going to quit until you win or die trying, and I think Hale underestimated that, so maybe we've got a chance. As evening fell, they prepared to move. Grant reviewed the plan one more time. We ride in quiet, get the documents, get out. No confrontation unless absolutely necessary. If Hale's men spot us, we run, Caleb finished. I know the drill. They rode out as full dark settled. Eliza led them through trails she'd known since childhood. Narrow paths through cottonwood groves, creek crossings, deer tracks through the brush. The land here was still familiar, still home, even if it belonged to someone else now. Mrs. Jameson's cabin appeared through the trees, a small structure with lamplight showing through the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. She was home. They approached carefully, watching for any sign of Hale's men. Nothing moved except the wind. Grant dismounted first, hand on his gun. Stay here while I knock. If it's a trap. It won't be, Eliza said, but she drew her revolver anyway. Grant knocked softly. A moment later, the door opened a crack. Mrs. Jameson peered out, an old woman with white hair and sharp eyes that went wide when she saw Grant's badge. Marshall. Mrs. Jameson, I'm here with Eliza Crow. She got your message about some documents. The door opened wider. Eliza? Child, is that you? Eliza dismounted, stepped into the light. It's me, Mrs. Jameson. The old woman's face crumpled. Oh, honey. I heard what happened with your father's land. I tried to speak up, tried to tell them the truth, but I know. It's all right. Eliza took her hand. You said you have documents my father gave you. Yes. Come inside quickly. Mrs. Jameson ushered them in, closed the door. I've been worried sick since I sent that message. Worried Hale's men might come asking questions. Have they? Grant asked. Not yet, but I see them riding past sometimes, watching. She moved to a cabinet, pulled out a metal box. Your father came to see me 3 days before he died. He was weak, could barely ride, but he said it was important. He gave me this and made me promise to keep it safe. Said if anything happened to him, to give it to you. She handed the box to Eliza. It was locked. Do you have the key? Eliza asked. He said you'd know where to find it. Mrs. Jameson looked apologetic. That's all he told me. Eliza turned the box over in her hands. It was old, battered. She'd seen it before. Her father had kept important papers in it when she was young. The key had been... She closed her eyes, remembering. Her father's desk, top drawer. a false bottom he'd shown her once. "I know where it is," she said. "It's at the ranch, in his desk." "The ranch that's now Hale's property," Caleb said. "Yes," Grant swore under his breath. "Of course it is. Nothing's ever simple." "We can't go in there," Eliza said. "The place is crawling with Hale's men. We wouldn't make it past the front door." "Then we find another way to open the box," Grant said. "Break the lock." "No." Eliza held it protectively. "Whatever's in here, my father wanted it kept safe. I'm not breaking it open." "Then what do you suggest?" Eliza looked at Mrs. Jameson. "Is the ranch house still set up the way it was before Hale took over?" "Far as I know. He moved his things in but didn't change much. Easier to just use what was already there, I suppose." "The desk is in the study, ground floor, east side of the house." Eliza's mind was racing. "There's a window that doesn't lock properly. Used to drive my father crazy. If it's still broken, we'll... "You want to break into Hale's house," Caleb said, "while he's probably inside, while his men are patrolling. You have a better idea?" Nobody did. Grant rubbed his face. "This is insane." "This whole thing has been insane," Eliza shot back. "But that box might have the proof we need, and I'm not leaving without it." "Even if it gets you killed?" "Even then." They stared at each other, then Grant sighed. "All right, we scout the place first. If it looks even remotely possible, we try. If not, we find another way." He looked at Caleb. "You in?" "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." "Then I'm in." They left Mrs. Jameson with promises to be careful and rode through the darkness toward what used to be the Crow Ranch, toward home, toward enemy territory. The house appeared through the trees, lit windows on the first and second floors. They could see figures moving inside. In the bunkhouse, more lights, men talking, playing cards. "How many you think?" Grant whispered. "Inside the house? Maybe 3 or 4. The bunkhouse has maybe a dozen more." Eliza studied the layout. "The study window is on the far side, away from the bunkhouse. If we're quiet, big if." They circled around, staying in the tree line. The window Eliza remembered was dark. No movement inside that room. "I'll go," Eliza said. "It's my father's desk, my key. If anyone has a right to be in that house, it's me." "And if you get caught?" Caleb asked. "Then you two ride like hell and don't look back." "Not happening." Caleb said, "I said not happening." His voice was firm. "We go together or not at all." Grant held up a hand. "Compromise. Eliza and I go. Caleb stays with the horses, ready to move fast if things go wrong. 2 people are quieter than 3 anyway." It made sense, even if Eliza hated leaving Caleb behind. She nodded. They dismounted, left the horses with Caleb, and moved through the shadows toward the house. Every sound seemed amplified. Their footsteps, their breathing, the creak of leather. They reached the window. Eliza tested it carefully. It slid up with barely a whisper. The study beyond was dark and empty. She climbed through. Grant followed. Inside, everything looked the same. Her father's desk sat against the wall, his books on the shelves, the chair where he used to sit and read to her. It hurt more than she'd expected, being here, seeing it all preserved like a museum to a life that was gone. She crossed to the desk, opened the top drawer, reached for the false bottom her father had shown her years ago. Her fingers found the catch, pressed. The panel slid aside. The key was there, small and brass, exactly where it should be. Eliza grabbed it, turned to leave. The study door opened. Light flooded in. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. Pike. "Well," he said, smiling. "This is interesting." Grant's gun was up instantly. "Don't move." Pike raised his hands, still smiling. "Easy, Marshal. I'm not armed. Just came to check on a noise." His eyes found Eliza. "Didn't expect to find a ghost in here." "Get out of the way," Grant ordered. "Can't do that. See, this is Mr. Hale's property. You're trespassing." Pike's smile widened. "And Mr. Hale doesn't take kindly to trespassers." "I'm a federal marshal conducting an investigation." "Funny. Looks more like breaking and entering." Pike's hand moved toward his belt. "I said don't move." Pike froze. "You gonna shoot me, Marshal? In Mr. Hale's house? That'll look great in court. Better than you stopping a federal investigation." They were at an impasse. Eliza could see it in both men's faces. Pike knew he had them cornered. Grant knew shooting would create problems. And every second they stood here arguing, more of Hale's men could arrive. Eliza made a choice. She lunged for the window. "Stop her!" Pike shouted, moving fast. Grant fired. The bullet went high, purposely missing, but the sound was deafening in the small room. Eliza hit the window, tumbled through, landed hard on the ground outside. She heard shouting from inside the house, more voices joining Pike's. Grant came through the window behind her. "Run!" They ran. Behind them, the house erupted with activity. Men pouring out, guns firing, bullets whipped through the air, thudding into trees. Caleb appeared with the horses, already moving. Eliza grabbed her reins, swung up somehow, and they were riding before she'd even settled in the saddle. More shots, someone yelling orders, the thunder of hooves as Hale's men mounted up to chase. They crashed through the underbrush, low branches whipping at them. Eliza's horse stumbled, caught itself, kept running. "This way!" She veered left toward the river. The trail was narrow, treacherous in the dark. But she knew it, had ridden it 100 times. Hale's men didn't know it. She heard horses behind them, close, too close. Then a crash and a scream as someone's mount missed its footing on the steep trail. They hit the river at a shallow crossing, water spraying up around them, climbed the far bank and kept running. The pursuit continued for another mile, then started to fall behind. The men didn't know this country like Eliza didn't know the shortcuts and the safe paths. Finally, the sounds of pursuit faded entirely. They slowed to a walk, horses blowing hard. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. "Everyone all right?" Grant gasped. "Hit," Caleb said quietly. Eliza's blood went cold. "Where?" "Shoulder. It's not bad." It was bad. Even in the darkness, she could see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "We need to stop." "Bandage that." "Not here. Too close." Caleb's voice was strained but steady. "Keep moving. We'll deal with it when we're safe." They rode for another hour before Grant finally called a halt in a small canyon. Eliza dismounted on shaking legs and helped Caleb down from his horse. In the moonlight, the wound looked ugly. The bullet had torn through the meat of his shoulder, missing bone but tearing muscle. "It went through," Grant said, examining it. "That's good. Nothing's lodged in there." He cleaned the wound as best he could with water from his canteen, then bandaged it with strips torn from a spare shirt. Caleb bore it without complaint, but his face was pale and slick with sweat. "You need a doctor," Eliza said. "I need to not get captured by Hale's men." Caleb managed a weak smile. "The rest can wait." "Can you ride?" "Have to, don't I?" Grant finished the bandaging and sat back. "We've made a hell of a mess. Hale knows we were in his house. He'll use that. Claim we're criminals. Turn the whole territory against us." "Let him claim what he wants." Eliza pulled out the keys she'd grabbed from the desk, along with the metal box Mrs. Jameson had given her. "We've got what we came for." She fitted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The box opened. Inside were papers, lots of them. Eliza pulled them out carefully, unfolded them in the moonlight. The first was a contract between Marcus Hale and a man named Jonathan Price, dated 2 years before her father's death. It outlined a plan to acquire land in the territory through fraudulent means, forged deeds, bribed officials, manufactured debts. The second was a letter from Judge Warren to Hale, discussing how to handle the Crow problem. It mentioned specific amounts of money, specific favors. The third was a copy of the deed Hale claimed her father had signed, but underneath it was another copy, the real one, with different signatures, different witnesses, proof of forgery.
"Dear Lord," Grant breathed, reading over her shoulder. "This is everything. This is fraud, conspiracy, bribery. This is enough to bring down half the territorial government." "Is it enough to get my land back?" Eliza asked.
"It's enough to put Hale in prison for 20 years, which means yes, you'll get your land back." Grant started gathering the papers carefully. "We need to get this to the territorial governor, or better yet, to a federal prosecutor. This is bigger than a land dispute now." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months." Grant looked at her. "But it will work. With this evidence, Hale's finished. Weeks, months." Eliza looked at Caleb, who was barely staying upright, at the blood on his shirt, at the darkness all around them and the enemies who would be hunting them come morning.
We don't have weeks, she said. What are you thinking? Caleb asked. Eliza stared at the papers in her hands. Evidence of crimes, proof of everything Hale had done. Her father's last gift to her, the ammunition to fight back. I'm thinking we don't run anymore, she said slowly. We've been running, hiding, playing defense. Let Hale make the moves while we react. You want to go on offense, Grant said. How? The town. Everyone there knows Hale's corrupt. They just don't dare say it because he controls everything. Eliza's voice got stronger as the plan formed. But if we show them this evidence, if we make it public, show them that we have proof and federal backing, they still won't stand against him. They're too scared. Maybe. Or maybe they're just waiting for someone to go first. Eliza looked between them. What if we occupy the land? My land. What if we go there, set up, and dare Hale to remove us? That's suicide, Caleb said. He'll come with every man he has. Let him come. But this time, we don't face him alone. Eliza's hands tightened on the papers. We invite the whole territory to watch. Make it public. Make it a spectacle. Force Hale to either back down or show everyone exactly what kind of man he is. Grant was quiet, thinking. It's risky. If it goes wrong, we're no worse off than we are now. Eliza looked at him. You said you can't enforce federal law without backup. What if we create our own backup? Not guns, witnesses, public pressure. Make this so visible that Hale can't just make us disappear. He could still kill us, Caleb pointed out. He could, but not quietly, not without consequences. Eliza felt something crystallize inside her. I'm done hiding, done running. That land is mine, and I'm going to stand on it and claim it in front of everyone. If Hale wants it, he'll have to take it from me in broad daylight with the whole territory watching. You're talking about making yourself bait, Grant said. I'm talking about making a stand. They rode at first light, straight toward the land that had started all of this. The homestead her father had built sat abandoned now, weathered by seasons of neglect. The barn leaned to one side. The fence posts had rotted through in places. But the house still stood, small, rough-timbered, defiant. Eliza dismounted and just looked at it for a long moment. Every memory she had seemed to live in that structure. Her mother teaching her to bake bread in the kitchen, her father reading by lamplight in the evening, the sound of her own laughter echoing through rooms that now sat silent. You sure about this? Caleb asked. His shoulder was wrapped tight, but he'd made it through the night. Stubborn as always. I'm sure. Grant was already surveying the area with a tactical eye. We're exposed here. No cover, open approaches from 3 directions. If Hale comes with force, then we'll see him coming. Eliza walked toward the house. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, everything was thick with dust and mouse droppings. But the structure was sound. She stood in the center of what used to be the main room and felt something settle in her chest. This was hers. Had always been hers. No forged document or corrupt judge could change that fundamental truth. We need to move fast, Grant said, following her inside. Get word to town, to the neighboring ranches. Make sure people know what we're doing before Hale can spin his own version. I'll go, Caleb offered. You'll stay here and rest that shoulder, Eliza said firmly. I'll go. People know me. They knew my father. If anyone's going to ask them to take a risk, it should be me. Grant looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Take one of the horses. Ride to every homestead between here and town. Tell them we're occupying this land under federal claim. Tell them we have evidence of Hale's crimes. Tell them if they want to see justice done, to come witness it. And if they won't come, then at least they'll know. Word spreads fast out here. By noon, Hale will know exactly what we're doing. Eliza took the fresher horse and rode. First to the Turner place, where old man Turner listened to her story with narrowed eyes and said he'd think about it. Then to the Kowalski farm, where Mrs. Kowalski cried and said her husband would want to help but was too afraid. Then to 3 more homesteads getting similar reactions. Fear, sympathy, but no commitments. By the time she reached town, her hope was wearing thin. She tied her horse outside the general store and walked inside. The store went quiet when she entered. A dozen faces turned to look at her, some curious, some hostile, most carefully neutral. She walked to the counter where Mr. Patterson, the store owner, was pretending to be very interested in his inventory book. Mr. Patterson, she said clearly,
I'm here to let you know that I'm occupying my father's homestead, the land that legally belongs to me according to federal records. I have a federal marshal with me and documented proof that Marcus Hale obtained that land through fraud and forgery. Patterson didn't look up. That's none of my business. It's everyone's business. Hale's been stealing from people in this territory for years. My father wasn't the first, and I won't be the last. She raised her voice so everyone in the store could hear. I'm making a stand, today, on my land. If anyone wants to witness justice being done or watch a woman get murdered by a cattle baron, you're welcome to come see. She turned and walked out before anyone could respond. Behind her, she heard whispers starting. She hit 2 more businesses, the blacksmith, the saloon, same speech, same reactions, mostly fear. She was heading back to her horse when a voice stopped her. Miss Crow. She turned. Mrs. Warren stood there, the judge's wife. Up close, she looked older than Eliza remembered, tired. My husband won't help you, Mrs. Warren said quietly. But that doesn't mean everyone agrees with him. She pressed a small bundle into Eliza's hands. Food? Bandages? I heard someone was hurt. Eliza looked down at the bundle, then back at Mrs. Warren. Thank you. My husband's a coward. He knows what Hale is. He just doesn't have the spine to stand against him. Mrs. Warren's eyes were wet. But maybe you do. Maybe that counts for something. She walked away before Eliza could respond. It was a small thing, just food and bandages. But as Eliza rode back to the homestead, it felt like more. Like maybe not everyone had given up. She found Caleb and Grant working on the house. They'd cleared out the worst of the debris, gotten the door hung properly, started basic repairs. Any luck? Grant asked. Maybe. She told them about Mrs. Warren, about the reactions in town. Word's spreading. People know what we're doing. Whether they'll come, we'll find out soon enough. Caleb was working one-handed, but working. Hale knows by now. Question is, what's he going to do about it? They got their answer around midday. A rider appeared on the road from Hale's ranch, just one man, carrying a white flag. He stopped at the property line and called out, I've got a message from Mr. Hale. Grant walked out to meet him, rifle in hand. Deliver it. Mr. Hale says you're trespassing on private property. He's giving you until sundown to leave peacefully. After that, he'll remove you by force. Tell Mr. Hale this land belongs to Eliza Crow under federal claim. Tell him I'm a federal marshal enforcing federal law. And tell him if he comes here with force, he'll be arrested for assault on a federal officer. The rider looked skeptical. One marshal against 20 armed men? One marshal with federal authority and documented evidence of Hale's criminal activity. Grant's voice was hard. You want to be part of that? You want to go down as an accomplice to fraud and attempted murder? The rider shifted uncomfortably. I'm just delivering a message. Then here's my message back. We're not leaving. We're here legally, and anyone who tries to remove us is breaking federal law. The rider nodded and rode off. Grant walked back to the house. Sundown, that's our deadline. How long do we have? Eliza asked. 5 hours? Maybe 6. 5 hours to prepare, 5 hours before everything came to a head. They worked through the afternoon, reinforced the doors, positioned supplies, loaded every weapon they had. Grant made copies of the most damaging documents and hid them in 3 different locations. If something happens to us, he said, at least the evidence survives. Eliza tried not to think about what something happens to us meant. Around 4 o'clock, she was checking the sight lines from the house when she heard horses. Multiple horses. Her hand went to her gun. They're early, but when the riders came into view, they weren't Hale's men. It was Mrs. Jameson. And behind her, 5 other people from neighboring homesteads. They weren't armed for battle. They just came. To watch. To witness. Mrs. Jameson dismounted stiffly and walked up to Eliza. We're not fighters, she said, but we can be witnesses. If Hale wants to do violence, he'll do it in front of us. For whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, Eliza said, her throat tight. More people arrived over the next hour. A few at a time. Families from nearby ranches, workers from town. People who'd known her father, people who'd suffered under Hale's power and never dared to speak. By the time the sun started sinking toward the horizon, there were maybe 30 people gathered. They set up away from the house, out of any potential line of fire, but visible. Watching. We've got an audience, Caleb said. That changes the math.
Does it? Grant scanned the crowd. Or does it just mean more witnesses to a massacre? Only one way to find out. The sun touched the mountains. Long shadows stretched across the land, and then they came. Hale rode at the front, flanked by Pike and a dozen armed men. More followed behind, maybe 20 total. They stopped at the property line, and Hale dismounted. He looked at the gathered witnesses, at the house, at Eliza standing in front of it with Grant and Caleb beside her. "Miss Crow," he called out, "this is your last chance. Leave now, and I won't press charges for breaking into my home last night." "This isn't your home," Eliza called back. "It's mine. Federal land records prove it." Federal records can be disputed. What can't be disputed is that you're trespassing. Hale gestured to the crowd. "All these people are witnesses. You were warned. You refused to leave. Whatever happens next is on you." "What happens next," Grant said, stepping forward, "is that you turn around and go home. Because I'm a federal marshal, and I'm enforcing a legitimate land claim. You're one man making accusations you can't prove. I can prove all of it." Grant pulled out the documents they'd found in her father's lockbox. "I've got your contract with Jonathan Price outlining fraudulent land acquisition. I've got letters between you and Judge Warren discussing bribes. I've got the real deed compared to the forgery you filed, all of it documented, all of it evidence of federal crimes." The crowd stirred. Hale's expression flickered just for a second before the mask came back. "Those are forgeries themselves, created by a desperate woman and a marshal who doesn't understand territorial law." "Then you won't mind if we take this to a federal prosecutor. Let them determine what's real and what's not." "I mind that you're trespassing on my property right now." "It's not your property," Eliza's voice rang out across the field. "You stole it, just like you've stolen from half the people here. You use fear and money and corrupt judges to take what doesn't belong to you, but not this time. This time you're going to answer for what you've done." Hale's mask cracked further. "You self-righteous little... Your father was a failure, a drunk who couldn't manage his own affairs. I did him a favor taking that land off his hands. My father was dying because you poisoned the creek that ran through his property." The words came out before Eliza could stop them. "I found the records. You diverted waste from your processing operation upstream. It got into our water. It killed our cattle. It killed my father." The crowd went dead silent. "That's a lie," Hale said, but his voice wasn't quite steady. "Is it? Then why did you pay the territorial health inspector to falsify his report? That's in the documents too." Eliza took a step forward. "You didn't just steal land, you murdered people, and you're going to pay for it." Hale's hand went to his gun. Pike moved closer to him, along with several of his men. The tension ratcheted so high it felt like the air might catch fire. "Last warning," Hale said. "Get off my land or I'll remove you." "Come try," Eliza said. For a long moment, nobody moved. The sun hung on the horizon, painting everything blood red. The witnesses held their breath. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Marcus." Everyone turned. A man on horseback sat at the edge of the gathered crowd. He wore a suit too fine for ranch country and a badge that caught the dying light. "Judge Harrison," Grant said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Responding to a telegraph from the territorial governor's office. Seems someone sent him copies of some very interesting documents." Harrison dismounted and walked forward, and Eliza saw the documents in his hand, copies of what they'd found. Documents alleging fraud, bribery, and environmental crimes serious enough to warrant a federal investigation. Hale's face had gone white. "Those documents are being reviewed by a federal prosecutor as we speak, along with testimony from several witnesses who've agreed to come forward." Harrison looked at the crowd. Witnesses who've been too afraid to speak until now, but seeing Miss Crow stand up gave them courage. 3 people stepped out of the crowd. Eliza recognized them. Neighbors, people her father had known, people who'd stayed silent at her trial. "I've got written statements from each of them," Harrison continued, detailing Hale's methods, his threats, his crimes. He turned to Hale. "Marcus Hale, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and multiple counts of environmental violation resulting in wrongful death. You can't..." Pike started to move, hand on his gun. Grant's rifle came up. So did Caleb's. And to Eliza's surprise, so did weapons from the crowd. Not everyone, but enough. People who'd been pushed too far,
scared too long. Pike stopped moving. "Stand down," Harrison ordered. "All of you. This is over." "The hell it is," Hale snarled. "I own this territory. I own the judges, the sheriff, You own Judge Warren, who's also under arrest. You own the sheriff, who resigned this morning." Harrison's voice was cold. "Your empire is done, Hale. The question now is whether you come quietly or whether we add resisting arrest to your charges." Hale looked around, at his men, who were slowly backing away, at the witnesses, who weren't looking afraid anymore, at Eliza standing in front of her father's house with federal law on her side. He'd lost. The reality of it was written across his face. "You'll never make it stick," he said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "I've got lawyers. You've got nothing," Eliza said quietly. "Just like you tried to leave me with nothing. How does it feel?" Hale didn't answer. Harrison's men, federal deputies Eliza hadn't even noticed arriving, moved forward and took him into custody. Pike, too, and two of his lieutenants. As they led Hale away, he looked back at Eliza one last time. "This doesn't change anything," he said. "The land's still disputed. The courts will return it to its rightful owner," Harrison said. "Federal claim supersedes everything you did. Miss Crow's land is hers, legally, finally." They took him away. His men scattered, suddenly very interested in being anywhere else. The crowd began to disperse, talking in low, excited voices. Eliza stood there as the sun finally set and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Relief. It was over. Actually, over. Grant walked up beside her. "You did it." "We did it." She looked at him, at Caleb. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." "Maybe not. But you started it. You refused to quit." Grant smiled. "Your father would be proud." The words hit harder than Eliza expected. She blinked back tears and nodded, not trusting her voice. As darkness fell, people started coming forward, offering help to repair the house, offering supplies, offering apologies for not standing with her sooner. Mrs. Jameson hugged her tight and whispered, "You're stronger than all of us. Thank you for showing us how to fight back." By the time full night had settled, the homestead was full of activity. Someone had started a fire. Someone else had brought food. It turned into something like a celebration, though a quiet one. People who'd been voiceless for years finally able to speak freely. Eliza found Caleb sitting apart from the others, his shoulder obviously bothering him. "You should see a doctor," she said. "I will, tomorrow." He looked up at her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might actually get to sleep tonight without nightmares." "That's a start." She sat beside him, and they watched the fire together. "What happens now?" Caleb asked after a while. "Now?" Eliza looked at the house her father had built, at the land he'd claimed and loved and died trying to protect. "Now I rebuild. Not just the house, everything. Make it what my father wanted it to be." "That's a lot of work." "It is." She looked at him. "I don't suppose you'd want to stick around? Help with the rebuilding?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know much about running a ranch. You know horses, you know hard work, and you know when to stand and when to run." She paused. "That's enough." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a home, if you want it." Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "Yeah, I want it." Over the following weeks, the territory changed. Judge Warren was removed from the bench. The sheriff's office was cleaned out. Hale's trial was set for the territorial capital, with federal prosecutors handling the case. The evidence Eliza's father had collected proved damning. The contract with Price, the letters detailing bribes, the environmental reports showing deliberate contamination. Witness after witness came forward. No longer afraid, Hale was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His property was seized and sold to pay restitution to the families he'd harmed. Eliza got her land back through a formal court order, federal and clean. No disputes, no forgeries. She stood in the yard the day the deed was officially transferred and felt her father's presence so strongly it almost hurt. She'd done it, finished what he'd started, gotten justice not just for him, but for everyone Hale had crushed. The house came together slowly. Caleb worked despite his shoulder, refusing to rest until it was functional. Grant came back through occasionally, checking on them, bringing news of the trial. Mrs. Jameson visited often, bringing food and gossip and the warmth of someone who'd known her father. Other neighbors started coming around too. Fences got mended, literal and figurative ones. 6 months after that night when Hale was arrested, Eliza stood on her porch and looked out at land that was undeniably, legally, finally hers. The barn had been rebuilt. The fences were strong. Cattle grazed in the pastures, not many yet, but growing. Caleb walked up beside her, his shoulder healed now, though he still favored it when rain was coming. "We've got a problem," he said. Her stomach clenched. "What kind of problem?" "The good kind. Mrs. Kowalski wants to sell us 3 of her horses. Says we're the only ranch she trusts." He smiled. "We're going to need to expand the corral." Eliza laughed, surprised by how good it felt. "Then we'll expand it." "We've also got another problem." "What now?" "The Turner boy asked if he could work here. Wants to learn ranching from people who run an honest operation." "That's not a problem. That's good news." "It is." Caleb leaned against the porch railing. "You're building something here, something that matters. People trust it. They trust you." "They trust us," Eliza corrected. He looked at her, and something in his eyes was different than it used to be, softer. "Yeah, us." They stood there in comfortable silence as the sun set over land that had seen so much pain and loss and was finally, slowly, healing. Eliza thought about her father, about his dreams for this place, about the life he'd wanted to build for her. She hadn't saved everything he'd created. Too much had been lost, too much damaged beyond repair. But she'd saved what mattered: the land, the legacy, the idea that doing right meant something, even when it cost everything. She'd learned things her father never had the chance to teach her: that justice was something you had to fight for, not something that just happened. That standing alone sometimes meant standing first so others could follow. That the law was only as strong as the people willing to enforce it. Most importantly, she'd learned that power, real power, didn't come from money or guns or corruption. It came from refusing to quit, from standing on your principles even when the ground was shaking, from being willing to lose everything for what was right. Her father had taught her to ride, to shoot, to work hard. Life had taught her to fight back. And together, those lessons had been enough. As the stars came out, Caleb went inside to start dinner. Eliza stayed on the porch a while longer, looking out at her land, her future. She'd started this journey beaten, starving, hunted. She'd ended it as a landowner, a symbol of resistance, and, maybe most surprising, someone who wasn't alone anymore. The frontier had a way of breaking people, had broken her father, had almost broken her. But it had also made her into someone who understood that the hardest battles weren't fought with guns. They were fought with stubbornness, with evidence, with the courage to stand when everything in you wanted to run. Somewhere out in the darkness, a coyote called. Eliza smiled, listening to the sound that used to mean loneliness and now just sounded like home. She went inside, where Caleb was burning something at the stove and cursing about it, where lamplight pushed back the shadows, where the smell of coffee and wood smoke filled the air, where life went on, imperfect and real and hers. The fight was over. The work was just beginning. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Eliza Crow was ready for what came next.